Good morning and welcome to Climate Action Network press conference. This morning we're focusing on how working together on climate change is in every nation's self-interest. At COP29 and afterwards, climate action must and can continue. It cannot and does not hinge on one country. The US has historically been more of a blocker than a champion of climate action, particularly regarding climate finance. At the same time, the US, a G7 member, will soon have a climate denier once again in the White House. Nearly 200 countries carried on working on climate during the first Trump administration, collaborating with many US states, and can fully expect this to carry on. Now we're going to hear from experts on how Canada, the EU, the UK, and Japan must step up in climate diplomacy. We are joined by Caroline from CAN-RAC in Canada. We are also joined by Chiara from Climate Action Network Europe, Catherine from Climate Action Network UK, and Hiro from Greenpeace Japan. Cara.
Thanks so much, Danny. I'm Caroline Bruyère. I'm the Executive Director of Climate Action Network Canada. Fossil fuel-driven climate change has increased the frequency and the severity of wildfires, floods, heat waves, and hurricanes in Canada. These unnatural disasters at home and around the world won't stop just because there is a climate denier in the White House. The global transformation towards a clean energy economy is already underway, and Trump turning his back on it will only penalize American workers, American communities, and America's geopolitical position. And you can be assured that there will be Canadian jurisdictions to pick up the clean energy investments that leave the United States if he does. As president of the G7 next year, Canada has an opportunity for leadership to center climate change in its presidency in a way that rebuilds trust with the global South. I'm also reminding myself of 2016 when Trump was elected the first time, and Canada, the European Union, and China set forward MOCA, or the Ministerial on Climate Action, for a new forum, a new coalition, showing that countries are still and working together to uphold climate multilateralism. Canada can play a role in building bridges, as our Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault and his team of negotiators have done at previous COPs. We've seen Canada's position on finance and a just transition away from fossil fuels, as well as loss and damage, shift significantly from where we were in past years. And we need to continue seeing a further shift. Yesterday's announcement from Canada on a new adaptation platform shows that Canada is listening to concerns of global South countries about the adaptation gap, but we'll be really watching for Canada specifically to push for a public finance core in the next long-term climate finance goal, as well as quality, accessible funds for those most vulnerable. Nationally, we'll be watching at Canada's next 2035 target. Canada must do its fair share of the global effort to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, and that means reducing its emissions by at least 80% below 2005 levels by 2030. Obviously, it's not just about the numbers. There must be a plan for getting there in a fast, fair, and achievable way without wasting time and money on techno fixes and dangerous distractions. So to conclude, climate multilateralism is hanging on by a thread, but it's needed now more than ever and is our best path forward and remains in every nation's self-interest. More than ever, we need Canada to show up, to step up, to show us the money. We're asking Canada to triple its current climate finance commitment as a first good faith down payment, and to show up with humility to respond to this moment of convergent and accelerating crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. Over to Chiara for the EU perspective.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yes, when it comes to the EU, I would say, first of all, that the EU likes to say that they are a leader on climate action, especially when it comes to the global stage. That happened. I think we need to recognize that. That happened in the past, but we don't see it in these days. We don't see this like in the last weeks, also before coming here, and we don't see it like in the first 2 days of this COP. Yesterday, we heard from the high-level representative of the EU at the World Leader Summit a very, I would say, blurry speech. Yes, he repeated a few times, you can count on us, but we didn't hear what exactly that means, that we can count on the EU. So this is where like, we are a little bit disappointed, and we are here to call on the EU to really show this climate leadership ambition they like to portray themselves with. And also, I would like to signal to the EU leaders here that are already here in Baku, that actually it's true, we are living not easy times also politically with the new setup of the new European Commission in Brussels, important meetings in the European Parliament in these exact days. But for example, yesterday we got some encouraging speakers, for instance, in the hearing of Teresa Ribera, that again has been pointing out there will be no regression on the European Green Deal. So this is the leadership we wanted to see also here in Baku from the EU representatives. And also we have been pushing the EU to, in light of the new geopolitical situation also across the globe, to actually increase efforts in strengthening new alliances and different alliances. So to look beyond the usual suspects, to look beyond the group of the donors or the group of the G7, but strengthen new strong partnership and cooperation and alliances. And in this regard, I would like to signal the high ambition coalition statement that has just been released this morning. And then maybe a couple of ideas and concrete ideas what the EU can do. I mean, we do have a very long list of things that the EU can do to show this leadership, but maybe I focus on two clear and concrete ones for those exact days. The first one is the EU behavior in negotiations around the NCQG. We would like to see a very concrete voice out of the EU negotiators, and not only a very blurry, I would say, statement without numbers, without clarity on what exactly that means. And a leadership means also showing the way, put proposals out there. And in particular, we would like to hear concretely the EU about the quantum. What exactly the number they think of it looks like. Is the number really reflecting the call that we have here also as CAN, as a civil society globally, that we would like to see moving from billions to trillions? And then also a very clear stand by the European Union on public finance. Yes, we do need to mobilize more money. We do need to think about the whole architecture of the development finance as a whole, but public finance needs to remain at the core, and the EU needs to lead the way.
Thank you, Chiara. Over to Catherine for the UK.
Good morning, everyone. So the new UK government offers us some hope for some renewed climate leadership, but of course that hope really needs to be translated into concrete action. And I think it's the climate finance negotiations here at COP29 that will be the biggest test of how far this new government wants to set itself apart from what's come before. So we've been pleased to hear the aspirations of this government. We've been pleased to hear a really clear message around solidarity with the countries most impacted by climate change, but also how it's important for the UK public as well. And there is consistently support from the UK public for greater climate action. Polls put it at 2/3 to 3/4 on a consistent basis. So there's a mandate to lead. The UK public wants the new government to do even more, and they were elected on stronger climate policies, so we will be holding them to that standard. There have been some good signals. We've seen progress on domestic action and commitments for clean energy by 2030. We've seen the appointment of crucial diplomatic positions, a new climate envoy and a brand new position as a nature envoy as well. We've heard the Foreign Secretary talk about climate justice and racial justice. And we've also seen the UK yesterday announce its NDC target based on expert independent advice. So really bringing in that important evidence base into policy making. But what we need to see more of then is turning that into action. We want to see a good, just transition for workers, but particularly we want to see a stronger focus on finance and public finance. And we just don't buy the story that there's not enough public finance for climate action. There's public finance going to subsidies, there's public finance going to tax breaks for oil companies. This is the funding that needs to be going to the solutions, not the problems. And we've seen plenty of reports showing just how much new public finance could be generated by making the wealthiest and largest polluters in our society pay their fair share for the action. And we think that that's the most fair and justice-based way to be raising the considerable sums of money that needs to be put on the table in grants-based funding to support climate action around the world. So that's what we'll be looking out for as the negotiations progress over coming days around the climate finance goal. And I think it's just really clear that the UK needs to step up, the British public wants that, and everyone here wants that, and it's in everyone's best interest to take the biggest steps forward that we can over the period at COP29.
Thank you, Kat. Now over to Hiro for Japan.
Thank you. Hi. Since the other speakers have brilliantly explained already what especially the developed countries and G7 need to show, I'd like to start with a bit more small examples. So this year, once again, is about to become the hottest year. And Japan is no exceptions that felt the impact. Aside all the climate disasters, the kids felt the most impact. The Japanese school actually have no regulation about temperature control. Hence, it sometimes reaches 40 degrees and making it very hard to study. I was impressed by one of the parents and teachers who started DIY, do-it-yourself project to improve the insulation of the school and trying to address the challenge themselves. Yesterday, Saitama City Mayor have joined the Accelerate to Zero coalition that promotes zero-emission vehicles. From a country with industry that resists the change to EV, this is a big shift and a courageous move. We can see those local leaders and communities are standing up and doing their best to address the challenge. This is a message to Japan, that we don't need a big problematic brother to look up to, but we can see all the leadership and the aspirations from the ground. And I think that's where we need to start thinking about how ambitious we can be. As others said very clearly, limiting global temperature rise, reducing imported fossil fuels dependencies, and building resilient societies are of our national and the people's interest. So to do that, upcoming NDC must reflect this ambition. Right now, Japanese government is internally discussing the figures that they are going to put forward. As developed nations, we must exceed global average that IPCC has put forward, 6% reduction by 2035 compared to 2019. We must go beyond and show that we are committed to this crisis, that we are asking Japan to commit about 78% compared to 2013 target, and that's how Japan needs to show their ambitions. To make a credible NDCs and the mitigation reduction pathways, they have to include the fossil fuel phase out in it. Japan has been very unclear and very reluctant to say that, and as one of the only countries among the G7 that doesn't have clear coal phase out plan, this is a must and it has to move. As a developed nations, Japan must help restore the faith in multilateral corporations. It has been one of the blocker countries in the financing discussions. But meaningful outcome in the NCQG is essential, and the resources exist but require political interventions. Implementing taxes on the ultra-wealthy individuals and fossil fuel polluting companies, they need to pay so that we can unlock additional public finance for developing countries. So I finished my intervention by saying that our government should and can show the strong, positive leadership that is so needed in this increasing polarizing world. And our future and our collectives depends on it and demands their strong commitment. And in this COP29, they need to show that with a strong NCQG, with full, fair fossil fuel phase out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hiro. Now we'll go to questions from the media. If you could say your name and organization. Here, please.
Thank you, Lucas Knigge for Table Briefings. I have a question for Chiara Martinelli. You said you asked the EU to step up. What exactly do you mean? Is that like by bringing forward a number for the NCQG? And what number do you actually expect? And when do you expect it? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, what I exactly mean is that first of all, in terms of voices in the room of the negotiations, we don't have very clear indication that the EU is very vocal, present, concrete, constructive, but more still on the asking questions mood. And I think this cannot be the behavior that we wanted to see. Second, yes, on number, as can, we do ask for an NCQG that is reaching at least 1 trillion as the whole goal, and that the EU will commit to its fair share. That I don't have the number in mind, but I think it's around the 1/3 of the 1 trillion is for the EU. So I think this is what we call for when we say we want them to be concrete. I have other examples of being concrete, but I keep it for the next.
Thank you, Chiara. Here, please. Second row.
Georg Ehring, German Radio, Deutschlandfunk. Thanks to Catherine for commenting on the new British goal. Could you comment as well on the new goals for Brazil and UAE, and maybe your expectations for Azerbaijan, which is due to make a goal announcement on this COP? Thank you.
Yes, so we don't speak for, I mean, I'm an Italian citizenship and I represent the European network, so I do speak for the EU citizens. So what we can answer to you is that what do we want from all these announcements of NDCs? And we have a very clear, I would say, red lines on the kind of NDCs we are waiting from all the countries that are in line with the 1.5 trajectory, that are enabling like an equitable energy transition, that are concrete on phase out from fossil fuels. And I use the opportunity to say that actually the EU, if it wants to do something concrete, needs to put end date to oil, coal and gas with the numbers and with deadline. So I think this is what we would like to see from NDCs coming in. And I think also the other thing importantly to say here is that we do expect many more of those announcements, and we do expect like from countries, especially from the climate leaders country, to respect also the timeline early next year.
Just to follow up on that, regarding the UAE, I mean, it was good that they came out early or ahead of COP29, but their NDC failed to address the fossil fuel phase out, and that is not acceptable. Then regarding Brazil, we're due to hear that announcement today at 5 p.m. approximately. You know, in the last few days we have had targets. They've teased us with a bit of information, shall we say. And so far we're welcoming that the NDC for Brazil includes an absolute emission reduction target, but we have to wait till later today to see what is actually in there. Second row here.
Hi, Mark Dolder from Newsroom New Zealand. A question for Hiro. The Japanese government plans to purchase 100 million tons of offshore mitigation to meet its first NDC. What's your reaction to the Article 6 kind of changes that have come through this year?
Thank you. Offshore what? Couldn't hear. Mitigation.
Mitigation, so 100 million tons of carbon credits.
Oh, yeah. I see. Thanks. Yeah, it is indeed true that Japan is trying their best to actually identify the areas that they can store their own emissions into other countries. And I think this is an absolutely problematic move that Japan is trying to do. Basically, what they are saying is that they're failing to reduce emissions at home, but then they have money and technology, so they're offering that in return of their land and resources and natural space to store their own carbon. So I think this is absolutely unacceptable. I think what Japan should prioritize reducing its own emission by accelerating renewable energies, energy efficiency measures, and other technologies that are readily available. But as you know, Japan's currently focused on technology that only useful toward the end, toward by the 2050s. So again, I think that is not acceptable or strategies, and that they can and should take a different approach.
At the back, gentleman in the hat.
Hi, Dhanaka from Energy Intelligence. I had a couple of questions. First was on Article 6 approval and the phrase of carbon removals. And the second was the judgment yesterday in Holland, the appeals court on Shell. Do you see these as a setback for the climate movement, one? And secondly, there seems to be a trend I observe, especially by the US. Mr. Podesta has been constantly referring to China and India as polluters, and for methane emissions, he's been trying to bring in agriculture into the picture, not just fossil fuels, which the US is responsible for. Do you think they are trying to pin down both pollution and climate finance onto developing countries to escape their responsibilities?
Sorry, could you repeat just the last part of your question, please? We didn't fully get it.
I meant that is the global north, led by the US, trying to escape the responsibilities of climate finance by trying to pinpoint countries like India and China as contributing to pollution and maybe also contributing to financing, cleaning up the pollution. Forgetting the fact that historical pollution is the fault of the West and not of China and India.
Thanks for that. I think we have to be very clear that the US was never a leader in climate negotiations. In fact, no matter who has been in power, whether the Democrats or the Republicans, we have seen this country obstruct and delay and dilute, especially on questions related to finance. And I think many of us still have in mind how they blocked the adoption of the loss and damage fund up to the very last minute in Sharm el-Sheikh. We think that countries from the global north, including our own countries in the G7, have a large historical responsibility and also a large capacity to not only go first and fastest when it comes to reducing their emissions and the transition away from fossil fuels, but also when it comes to their Paris Agreement responsibility under Article 9 to provide finance to developing countries. Apologies for that. And so I think that what the message that we're sharing today is that whether or not the U.S. is, no matter who is at the head of the U.S., we're expecting our countries, and I am expecting Canada to do its fair share of the global effort to provide resources to developing countries and play a constructive role to meet the needs of developing countries in the negotiation of the NCQG, because that is really what it takes to maintain the Paris Agreement alive. Finance is one of those the key pillars of the compromise that was the Paris Agreement, and we have not only the risk but the opportunity here to adopt an ambitious and just goal that makes limiting warming to 1.5 degrees not only fair but possible.
And then just on the Shell ruling, we remain defiant as civil society. There is a lot of action happening regarding climate litigation. This is a setback, but this does not stop. We also have, in December, we're going to see some developments regarding the ICJAO. So for those who aren't aware, it's a climate justice advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice. And that, if that gets through to the UNGA, et cetera, that would mandate countries to act. And so that will be a step change. Thank you. Next question. Okay, we will wrap up now. The panel will be available outside for further questions. Thank you very much.